Morning guys, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I'm going to shoot a little video today about 21st century Longhunter mentality, a little bit about what that means to me, and we're going to go ahead and set up what I consider just a quickie 21st century Longhunter camp. Stay with me guys. You know, I think what's important for us to understand is that the 21st century Longhunter mentality is based around the 5 and 10 C's of survivability, of course. But what it means is that you are able to become comfortable, at least in the short term, without all of the trappings that you have at your house. You're not going out into the woods with a ton of gear. You're taking those 5 C's of survivability and everything else that you need, you should be able to obtain from the landscape fairly easily. Like this tripod that I'm making to stabilize my shelter. And if we understand that, and we understand how to utilize our 5 C's to the best of our ability, then we should, in not too long a time of being out in the woods and practicing our skills, get what Mark Baker coined as our doctorate in woodsy knowledge. And guys like Daniel Boone and Isaac Bledsoe and Casper Mansker and the Gertie brothers, those guys all had their doctorate in woodsy knowledge, and they could go into a wilderness environment and not have to have a whole lot of stuff with them, save what they needed for their direct survivability. And I think that if you look at those items that were carried back then, they boil down to the 5 C's. And that's why I created that concept. They boil down to having cutting tools, a way to make fire, a roof over your head and microclimate like shelter, and then a basic container of some sort for disinfecting water, cooking food, making medicines and things of that nature. And beyond that, if you've got some cordage, you're in pretty good shape. And you can see we're using cordage right now to affect our tripod. Now, what's important to understand here is that we're not trying to duplicate the 18th century Longhunter down to the T of his equipment. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make it so that we have that Longhunter mentality or that pioneering mentality, and we can get by with the things that they got by with on a basic level. And if we can find things that are improvements on what they had, then it's okay to carry those, as long as we understand the rudimentaries of using the items that they use as well, so that we understand why those items were effective for them in that period. And that's why you see me carry things like modern cordages, but a flintlock gun sometimes, or a caplock gun, or a single shot 12 gauge. All of those are steady improvements over time of basically the same concept of a smooth bore shotgun. And that's the key element in that whole thing, is when you take away the variables of, okay, this just needs a 209 shotgun primer and a shell, this just needs a 209 shotgun primer or a priming cap and black powder, and this just needs a rock and black powder. The improvements over time to that still boil down to the same thing. It's a single shot shotgun. And I think that's where you need to understand and separate the variables and get down to the root core of what that 21st century Longhunter mentality is. Okay, so this is the bedroll. And you can see there's just a brass bucket attached to that. A very simplistic container. Something to collect water from a water source that I'm right beside now, and cook in as well. And I've got a tin cup in my haversack that I can use to drink water out of. Okay, so inside my bedroll I have my fine forest axe. I have a squirrel cooker. This is very unnecessary, and an S-hook, but it makes it very convenient if I'm cooking meat over the fire, or I just want to boil a kettle, or whatever the case may be. And I can use this for a fire poker as well. It's just more convenient than trying to carve a bunch of stuff to me. And then I have a pretty good hank of hemp rope in here, and then my wool blankets rolled up inside. So having our wool blanket on the inside keeps it fairly dry. Spare clothing could also go inside here, an extra pair of socks, an extra shirt, whatever the case may be. I generally don't carry extra pants. But those things could also be rolled up inside here as well and take up not very much more room at all. Now, I know somebody's going to ask me about weight, and people seem to worry about weight all the time, and I'm not really sure why. If you're not carrying that much equipment, the weight of what you are carrying shouldn't be that much that it's going to affect you. This bedroll, as you saw it, weighs about 14 pounds. Stripped, it weighs 12. With nothing in it but this, it weighs 12. If you put the squirrel cooker, the axe, the bucket in there, that bumps it up to around 14, close to 15 pounds. I didn't get a very good accurate weight on it, but it was pretty close to 15 pounds, I think, with everything in it. And that includes the harness itself. So 15 pounds isn't that much weight, and you've got a lot of things that affect your survivability, or that will help you with your doctorate and woodsy knowledge with you. You have your cover element, you have part of your container element. If that's all you had, then you could get away with that easy enough. You have a spare cutting tool in there, and you have some cordage. So you have a lot of your survival needs met, your basic survival needs met, just in this bedroll. So to take up 15 pounds of weight for that, when I look at it that way, it's not so much. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag our corner of our tarp, and we've got this thing in diamond configuration, which there's no new shelter inventions as far as setting up a tarp, guys. They've all been used for centuries. This is just one way to do it, and I'm going to show you how to set up a plow point or a wedge using a frame with a tarp. Gives you a very structurally stable shelter that will stand up to wind. You can adjust the pitch on it as you wish, and it's just a really good all-around shelter. So I'm just going to stick a peg right through there and draw that tight, and that's going to keep that from coming out of there. There's no way that can come out now. Simple use of a toggle is going to hold that in there. Okay guys, so I've got the back stake down back here, and then the two corner stake down. Now this tarp has got some tie-out loops along the center line of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a toggle right through this loop. Right there's my toggle. I'm going to run that through this tie-out loop, which is right in the seam there, just like that. Pull that up over the top of the center ridge pole, just like this. And hope I've given myself enough rope to play with. And I'm just going to lash that around there a couple times and half hitch it off. That was just a short piece of rope I had left over. I didn't want to cut another piece. But that stuff binds to itself good enough that that should work. Now that lifts that center line up, and you'll see what that looks like on the inside. So now you can see where that center line is lifted up right there, and you can see the corner staked out. I've got a nice high front with just a tripod in front of it, and I can adjust that pitch by spreading those legs if I want to, and then stake it out again on the sides. The length can stay the same, but that gives you a real stable shelter that's going to keep a lot of weather off of you. And this was a classic shelter that was used all along the frontier of this style and design. Now this oilcloth tarp, you can see, I'm going to go over to the other side so I can get out of my own shadow here for you guys. But the way this thing is built, Tent Smiths does a great job on these things. You can see it's got a triangle sewn in here right there, and here's your loop, and the loop is actually a sewn loop. You can see it's stitched on both sides and the fabric's doubled over. You're not going to rip that loop out. And then on the bottom, it's got another triangle sewn on the bottom side. So that thing's completely stitched in there. These loops that are on the seams are actually stitched into the center seam. So you're not going to yank those out either. And those would work really well if you were, this runs along the center line if you were using it in a square configuration. So like if you're using it for a tarp over a hammock or something like that, or just a tube style tent, pup tent design, those would work really good for your ridge line. And keep your ridge line on the outside that way. So this is the Tent Smith 8x8 trail tarp made out of oilcloth. And I wanted to show you guys how to set that portion of a camp up in a more 18th century style or fashion not to say that was invented then, because it was around long before that. It's been used and modified long since after that. But this is a very classic design that you only need to cut 3 poles for, and then 3 stakes. And it's pretty versatile as far as quick up and down, and you can make it fairly permanent fairly quickly just by making sure you've got good structural ability with your poles. Here's just a really quick tip for you. You take off a piece of clothing and you hang it somewhere. Before you put it on, check it. There's a tick crawling on this thing right there. Throw him over in the fire. Check to make sure there's no more on there before I put it on. Inside and out. It's always a good practice, especially in eastern woodlands during tick season, like right now. Guys, you know, I think it's important for us to understand in 21st century longhunter mentality that the 5 C's of survivability is really the drop dead, draw the line. That's what we have to have. And if we have good types of cutting tools and we have a good element of cover, multiple ways to start fire, a couple different containers, and several types of cordage, we can do a lot with just those items. And then anything beyond that really, you know, boils down to procuring food. And our forefathers that had their doctorate in woodsy knowledge, those guys understood two things very well. They understood how to sleep and how to get a good night's sleep, and they understood how to secure food. And I think those are the things that we need to concentrate on, because I think those are the things that are really left out in the community today as far as teaching is, what do I need to do to effectively get a good night's sleep when I'm in the woods, and what can I do to make sure that my belly's full? Because if my belly's full and I get a good night's sleep, I can suffer through a whole lot during the day and still be pretty comfortable and still be smooth in it. Guys, I appreciate you joining me out here for another video today. I appreciate everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, for my affiliates, my friends, and my sponsors. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.